Hi, I'm Tim Autrey, and I wanted to do some straight talk about performance improvement, about PPI, and about this thing that we call the Certification Summit. You know, I got interested in what's now called human performance or human and organizational performance or high reliability or HPI, HOP, whatever you want to call it, whatever label you want to put on it. I became interested in the underlying essence of all of that, which I like to refer to as human behavior back when I was a kid. Started about the age when I was 10 or so. Actually, it started when I read a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. Totally set me on a path. So I was an entrepreneur when I was a kid, started a business when I was in high school that actually did pretty gosh darn well, made some bad decisions that crashed and burned. I ran away from all my problems and I joined the Navy. Now, as it turned out, that actually ended up being a pretty gosh darn serendipitous sequence of events, although it sure as heck didn't feel like it at the time, because I ended up in the nuclear Navy, which at the time Admiral Rickover was still around, and I got to learn a tremendous amount about how to do things, how not to do things, how you can take kids basically out of high school and in a relatively short period of time make them competent operators of nuclear power plants. And one of the things that fascinated me about that was all of the things that they made us learn about the theory about what this is, how it works, why it works that way, and then building upon that, what to do as operators and as technicians and so forth to make things work. So I learned a lot about this, and I also discovered my love for teaching while I was in the Navy. So I ended up, when I got out of the Navy, the allure of the amount of money they were paying for nuclear operators drew me right into commercial nuclear power. And I ended up working at a series of nuclear power plants. And I ended up at the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant, which was my last job that I had in the commercial nuclear power industry. And at that facility, I had the opportunity to conduct an experiment. And what I was able to do there was I was able to take all of the human behavior and psychology and all that stuff that had fascinated me since I was a kid and put it together with all of the human error reduction efforts that were going on in the nuclear power industry at the time. Put all that together, and I was able to convince senior leadership at the facility that, you know what, I had maybe a better idea or a better way to getting people to do right things in right ways, even when no one was watching. Now, human error reduction in the nuclear power industry at that point in time was called human performance. I love the term because when you think about it, human performance really lies directly underneath everything. It doesn't matter whether you're a senior executive, whether you're a board member, whether you're a brand new hire, whether you're a teacher in school or in Sunday school or a parent with your children or in your significant relationships, whatever it is, human performance lies just underneath all of that. Now, of course, in industry, and particularly in industries where the stakes are high, where if somebody makes a mistake, really bad things can happen, there's a vested interest in improving safety and reliability and efficiency. And of course, in any endeavor, there's definite interest in improving productivity and of course, even profitability. Human performance lies underneath all of that. So I had the opportunity to conduct this experiment at the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant, and it kind of blew everybody away. The results were amazing. Over about a 30-month period, we reduced the incidence of error at that facility by 87.5%. 87.5%. I mean, the whole nuclear industry at the time kind of stood up and took notice. I was being asked to speak around the industry, telling them how I did it. Now, at that time, the nuclear industry was pretty much what I like to refer to as command and control. So I went around and I gave addresses to senior nuclear leaders all over the place. And when I told them how we did this and the underlying approach is really not more command and control, it's all about kind of letting go of the leash and appealing to the intrinsic desires and aspects and positive attributes of human nature, a lot of them didn't receive it very, very well. Fortunately, some of them did. Well, as that progressed there at Vermont Yankee and we got into 2005, I decided there was a bigger picture here because I saw that the entire world could benefit from what we had discovered there, which were the underlying principles, once again, of why people do what they do the way they do it. Now, at this point in time, my career was, it was on an exponential upward trajectory, and I came home one day and I told my lovely wife, I said, I'm quitting my job. And she said, what are you talking about? And so anyway, after I told her what was going on and the vision I had, she said, all right, I'm with you. So we held hands, we jumped off the cliff together. And I won't say we never looked back because it was really slow going for the first year or so. And there were a lot of times I would, be taking a shower in the morning or whatever and thinking to myself, what in the world have you done, Autrey? Anyway, it all worked out. We ended up getting some significant clients and then it just took off. So that all kind of came together. And by 2013, 2014, our team kept saying to me, you got to write the book, you got to write the book, you got to write the book. So my first book, 6-Hour Safety Culture, was published in 2015, in the summer of 2015. And it's been fairly well received. It's definitely a bestseller in our little niche. And basically it told the story. A lot of the story that I just told you about what we had learned and then about the strategies, the methodologies, and the tools that had been developed. And a lot of that stuff, I took the original basis for it from a lot of the good stuff the nuclear power industry was doing and then put the human performance, my version of human performance, spin on it. So things are going really, really well. And then we had the global shutdown, which we're all familiar with. And during that time period, I had the opportunity to do a lot of introspection and reflection. And I was thinking, all right, so at that point in time and to date, we have created a string of client success stories that's really unparalleled in this performance improvement industry. I had quite the opportunity to sit back and say, all right, what was it or what is it that makes this approach so phenomenally powerful? And what I realized was we were really focusing on a relatively small handful of principles. It's all based on a simple handful of principles that are intrinsically important to human beings. 7 of them to be precise. You may or may not have seen some of the materials that we have out there on that. So I discovered that, and so that is leading and has led really to the writing of my second book, The 7 Natural Principles of Human Performance, which as I record this is almost finished and it'll be out very, very soon. When you look at approaches to human performance, there are a lot of good people out there, a lot of smart people out there doing really smart things. And if you're interested in performance improvement, there are many approaches you can take. One of them is going to conferences. And I got to tell you, I love conferences. I have probably spent more money going to conferences than any other human being I know. Not only have I gone to a bunch of them, but I've spoken at a bunch of them. And the thing about that is, I'm not going to discourage you from going to conferences because you can learn a lot of really good things. There are a lot of really smart people. There are a lot of practitioners talking about, hey, this is what we're doing at our facility and this is really working for us and you ought to test this out. However, what I've discovered from conferences is people go there and if you're the note-taking type, you take lots of notes and you go home and it's like, okay, what am I really supposed to do with this? This really hit home with me when I had a significant presence at the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, more affectionately known as NERC, very first ever human performance conference. And there were some brilliant people on the stage. I enjoyed listening. I spoke a bunch, and so there were some brilliant people, and then there was me. But anyway, what fascinated me was the after-hours discussions, which, by the way, is one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion, of going to those conferences, are the after-hours discussions of colleagues that are interested in doing the same thing. So it became a predominant message to me. We'd have these conversations with these folks, and I'd hear things like, you know what, man, this is a lot of great stuff, but I still don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do with all this information? So let's say you decide, I'm going to go to all these conferences and I'm going to learn all this stuff on my own and I'm going to read all these books and so forth and so forth. How long would it take you, and maybe you've already been to a conference or two, but you make a concerted effort. All right, I'm going to really focus on this human performance thing. And remember, my definition of human performance is very simple. It's why people do what they do the way they do it. And if you want to implement a human performance effort in your organization, what you want to do is you want to get to 2 primary objectives. One of those is you want to inspire your team members or your employees to do right things in right ways, even when no one's watching. And culturally, what you want to do is you want to move your team, your department, your organization closer and closer and closer to functioning as one team with one goal having one conversation. Here's the question I want to ask you. With that level of understanding of what human performance is and where the ideal culture resides, how long would it take you, either with a combination actually of learning and trial and error and so forth, how long would it take you to get to the point where you would consider yourself to be a subject matter expert in principle-based human performance? And as far as I'm concerned, you're going to hear me talk about principle-based more and more as I continue with this discussion, because in my opinion, focusing on these principles are more important now than they've ever been before. So let's say that you're going to take that path, and a lot of people do. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of folks out there that love to learn and they love to hear difference of opinions and make up their own mind. I highly encourage you to make up your own mind. But if you really want to jumpstart that, or if you're looking for, okay, how can I become really knowledgeable about all of this stuff in a few days? That's what the Certification Summit is all about. You can go onto our website, ppiweb.com or ppiweb.io, whichever you prefer, and you can find an entire library of testimonials of people who have participated in the PPI approach and people who have participated in the summit. And one of my favorite testimonials is a young lady who said, I have a master's degree, 6 years of college in organizational psychology. And she said, in a few days here, I pretty much learned the same thing I learned in 6 years of college. But it doesn't stop there. It also layers in all of the science that the nuclear power industry and the airline industry has learned over the years directly about human error reduction. You put those things together and it's fantastic. So in a very short period of time, in about 5 days, you will learn enough to be considered a subject matter expert in human performance. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, the only kind of human performance that matters from this point going forward, which is principle-based human performance. The summit also gives you an opportunity to take an exam. Once you're finished, it's totally voluntary if you want to take it. You pass the exam and you get your PPS certification, which stands for Principle-Based Performance Specialist. And this certification is becoming more and more and more recognized in the industry as someone who has what it takes to navigate, to coordinate, as a practitioner, as a senior leader, as a department head, as a supervisor, as a trainer, to navigate human performance successfully into the present and on into the challenges of the future. So at the summit, what we do is we take the whole thing from start to finish. First of all, we go through what the heck principle-based performance is. And it goes all the way down to what I like to refer to, and what a lot of other people refer to as first principles thinking, where all this came from, and then the validation of it and how important it is. So that's the what. Then we spend a significant period of time talking about why this works so well. And what we find is a predominant piece of feedback from people who have gone to the summit or who have gone through our leadership trainings and so forth. We hear a lot of people say that there are two things. One of them is, you know what, this is the best training I've ever been to, or this is the best leadership training I've ever been to. One of our other testimonials, there was a gentleman that came to one of our summits, and he had been in the industry, in the electrical industry, for about 30 years. And he had made it a point, because he loved to learn, to take some type of class. He said he's been to every leadership class that the American Management Association has put together, and a lot of other classes. And he's made it a point every year to take at least one training. Well, this particular year, he came to our summit, and he said, hands down, he said, this is way above and beyond, by far the best leadership training I have ever seen. So that's really what it comes down to. Now, we spend, I would say, 2/3 of the time talking about what this is and why it works. Because if you're going to be an expert in something, you really need to understand what's underneath. So we spend about 2/3 of our time talking about what this is and why it works, and about 1/3 of the time specifically talking about how to do it. Because once you have all that understanding, it becomes pretty simple to understand then how these simple insights, strategies, and tools fit together to do the things I talked about before, which, just to remind you, are to inspire people to do right things in right ways for right reasons, even when no one's watching, and to move your work environment and ultimately your culture to function more and more and more as one team with one goal, having one conversation. So now one of the questions that comes up is, okay, I'm a CEO, I'm a president of a company, I'm a senior vice president, I'm a department head, I'm a frontline supervisor, I'm a plant manager, I run the waste treatment facility, I do whatever, I'm a trainer, I'm a small business owner. Is Summit appropriate for me? Let's talk about if you're a senior executive in an organization, why might you want to consider coming to Summit? Couple of reasons. Number one, consider this. This is another one of our key insights. Environment is almost always stronger than will. Now, what the heck do I mean by that? Who is, generically speaking, the most enthusiastic, gung-ho member of the team? Well, it's typically the new person, right? Because they come into an organization, they're excited, they're fired up, they're grateful for having been hired, and they come into an organization with a brain and with a heart, honestly believing they can make a difference. And I would say this is true for the lion's share of human beings. Then they come into an environment. So I want to ask you, what's the quality of your current work environment? What's the quality of the culture across your entire organization? As a senior executive, you are in a highly, highly leveraged position to impact the quality of that environment. Now, who has the lion's share, and let's talk about how this multiplies. Who has the lion's share of impact on the work environment if you consider a work environment with you and the folks that directly report to you? You do. Now, when you create a quality work environment that enables the folks that report to you to create quality work environments for the folks that report to them, and it goes on and on and on, that's why you are in a position to greatly impact your organization on every level we're talking about here. So if you would like to, and maybe you're super good at doing things, but if you really want to hone your skills, you want to sharpen them up, or maybe there are a few areas of, I've been way too much command and control and I want to get away from that because I know that's not how the future works. Man, these Gen Z folks, they don't respond to command and control at all. The Summit would be a great place for you to come. So now, what about if you're a plant manager or department head, or you're somewhere in the middle? All I'm saying is if you're a senior executive, a plant manager, a mid-level manager, and you want to hone your skills, you want to know how to get beyond this, and especially for those of you who are still a little bit what I'd like to refer to as conventional or old school when it comes to human performance and dealing with people, man, coming to the Summit can benefit you greatly. So now let's talk about the linchpins in the organization. One of the questions that I love to ask in a live training is, who is it positionally by far that has the greatest impact on how tasks are performed and work is actually done on a day-to-day, task-by-task, job-by-job basis? By job title, who's the individual that has most impact on that? It's the frontline supervisor. Think about you. You have a supervisor of some sort. Who is it in the organization other than yourself that has the most impact on how you do and even on what you do? It's your frontline supervisor, whoever it is that you report to. So now we typically think in organizations about frontline supervisors being the last level of defined leadership between the folks on the front line, the individual contributors, whatever you want to call them, and their supervisor. That's the frontline supervisor. That frontline supervisor is creating an environment within that work team. Just as environment is almost always stronger than will, team members or employees can only sustain levels of performance that are supported by the environment. If the environment doesn't support exceptionally good behavior, people aren't going to be able to sustain exceptionally good behavior. You think the behaviors of individuals on one team compared to those on another are going to be any different? Of course they are, because as human beings, we respond to our environment. So now one of the things that we're seeing, especially since, we've gotten past that global shutdown, which I like to refer to as the global flu season. Since we've gotten past that, a lot of folks that were they were older in frontline supervisor roles or what, a lot of people just decided not to come back to work. And so what we're seeing now demographically is we're seeing a lot of very young millennial, young Gen Z folks come in, and they're A players, they're fast starters, they're smart, they're intelligent, and they get promoted into frontline supervisor positions. Great for them, great for you when it's handled properly. The thing is, These younger generations have been brought up in a society and typically gone to school that where they've known nothing but be nice, and it's group problem solving, and you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Well, guess what? When you're in a leader position, you can't conduct yourself that way. Now, this isn't pointing fingers or blame or fault at any individual. All I'm saying is these younger folks that are now getting into frontline supervisor positions oftentimes really don't have a clue how to lead. Man, I'm telling you, sending your frontline supervisors to the Certification Summit would be one of the most powerful things you could ever do for the future of your organization. Another job category that I want to talk about is trainers and coordinators. Oftentimes, someone has the position of human performance coordinator, or even if it's a safety director position where you don't have a whole department, but you have that title. Folks that are training others, particularly when you're doing technical training, job skill training, following procedure training, that sort of stuff. And when you have coordinators that whose job is highly focused on safety or productivity or reliability or efficiency or whatever it happens to be. If you happen to be in one of those roles, you can benefit tremendously by coming to the Certification Summit, because you're going to learn all the psychology of how to influence and how to lead. And for trainers specifically, what it does is it arms you with the ability to intersperse. It doesn't matter what you're training, you can intersperse good quality human performance psychology into whatever it is you're teaching, to the benefit of the individuals, your students, and to the overall benefit of the organization. And finally, small business owners. Oh my gosh, small business owners are facing huge challenges today. As I record this, we are in a period of relatively high inflation. We've got all the stuff going on in society. People have different values and differing perspectives. And, there's the age-old thing, which, by the way, I don't think is any different now than it ever has been before. Oh, these young kids, they don't want to work and so forth. People have always said that. However, their perspectives and their worldview are a little bit different. As a small business owner, I think you're more acutely aware of this than anyone, because especially if you've been in business for a while, because it's like, oh man, what used to work doesn't seem to work anymore. These younger kids that are coming in, they're different. Well, you can learn all about that in the Certification Summit, about how to deal with that. And just one quick story. We had a small business where they fully implemented the PPI approach. And in the 12 months following, first of all, they had high turnover prior to doing this. 12 months following, zero turnover. Errors went down by 65%. Profits went up by 35%. Now, small business owner, what would that do for you? You want to know how to do that? Come to the summit. It's really that simple. So let's talk more specifically about the summit. What I do every time we do a summit is I bring the latest and greatest stuff that I'm studying and that I have learned. Remember, this is a combination of timeless wisdom plus modern science and the insights that come from putting all of that stuff together. So I am continually tweaking things right up until we do summit. I teach the whole thing. And I will tell you, this is not our primary business model. We don't do this for the sake of making money. Now, do we make money on a summit? Sometimes we do. Sometimes we break even. And that's not the point. The point is to get this information out to folks so that they can get really jazzed up about this. We really have started a movement with this whole principle-based performance improvement approach or methodology. And when people come to Summit, you're being trained to kind of be the officers in the movement, the subject matter expert, the folks to go out there and really multiply where this can happen, when it can happen, and how rapidly it can happen. And the thing about this is, when this happens for a team, a small business, a department, an entire organization, everybody wins all the way to the bottom line. My goal during the summit is to give you everything I can think of to help you be successful. That's the whole point of the summit. Now, who's Summit not for? I'll tell you, if you are a box checker, and what do I mean by box checker? I mean, if you think that, first of all, you got to find a box that you can check so that you can fix the human problem in your organization, and that's the extent to what you want to do and you want to wash your hands of it, don't bother coming to Summit, because that's not what it's all about. If you are extremely rigid in your thinking, and I'll tell you quite honestly, in this human performance space, I've come across folks that so-called experts in this space, and they say things like, man, if somebody doesn't know what a latent organizational weakness is or understand the difference between slips, lapses, and mistakes and all of that, they don't know human performance. And I would say, look, man, that's fine for you. You want to be an expert in all that stuff? Go for it. We need people who are experts in all that stuff. But I can tell you now, having done this for 2 decades, 20 years across 5 continents, having worked with well more than 100,000 leaders and their team members all over the world, I can tell you that the average human being, lots of leaders included, really don't care about any of that. The whole thing people are interested is, give me something to help me do my job better, where we can be more successful as a team or as a company, and do it in a way where everybody wins. Those are the folks who love what we do in PPI and what we teach you how to do in the summit. So in closing, you may be thinking, yeah, I've spent the time watching this whole thing. And if you have, thank you very, very, very much. God bless you actually for taking the time to watch this. And you may be thinking, this doesn't sound really like it's for me, or I can't afford it, or I can't get approval for it, or whatever it is at this point in time. That's perfectly fine. Look, on our website, ppiweb.com or ppiweb.io, whichever one you want, it's the same place, by the way, we have tons of resources. And tons of resources you can download for free. Just go onto the website, go to resources, you'll see pages of stuff. For me, I want to teach people, and PPI has always been this way. Our facilitators, our entire organization has always been this way. We want to teach people how to fish, not just give you a fish, so that you can ultimately take this and go on your own. To wrap this up, let me just say this. Whether Summit sounds like it's great for you and you want to come, outstanding, I would love for you to be there. I love the quality of people that come to the summit. We have such an amazing time. We create this environment and this energy and this synergy that just really is really spectacular. So by the end of the week, even though I'm exhausted, I'm incredibly inspired, and it keeps me going really till we get to the next summit. Beyond that, this principle-based performance approach is the way to deal with all of that, because you stick to those 7 principles proactively and come from a perspective of win-win. Once again, that's how you inspire people to do right things in right ways, even when no one's watching. And this is how you can bring your work environment, your team, your culture, ultimately working more and more together as one team with one goal, having one conversation.
At PPI Global, we believe that when you have the opportunity to make things better and safer, you also have the obligation. If you are truly interested in improving human and organizational performance in the present, and doing so in a way that lasts, that sticks, that reaps continually improving results far into the future, the PPI Certification Summit is the fastest, most efficient way to learn how to do so. For details on our next summit, including dates and location, a detailed itinerary, and registration and tuition discounts, go to ppisummit.com. That's ppisummit.com. If you have specific questions about PPI or about the summit, use the contact link at the bottom of the page or give us a call. I'll be happy to talk to you personally if you desire. At PPI Global, we are continually reaching out to leaders who are seeking to expand their awareness and understanding of why people, teams, and organizations do what they do the way they do it. Thanks for listening to this straight talk about principle-based performance and the PPI Certification Summit. Please share this info with your friends and colleagues. Help them become part of the movement to help make our world better and safer. We greatly appreciate you. Until next time, my friend, be safe, stay humble, and make a difference.